Hello, everyone. So this video is covering chapter 15 of our promo text. It's the last chapter in our book where we try and bring a few things together, talking about the entirety of integrated marketing and communications and understanding effectiveness. Like what we're doing actually effective, and are we going through this for a reason? So talk about the evolution of that brand promotion, talk about some of the measurements that we use to measure the effectiveness of advertising. And we'll get into some of the specifics like internet advertising, PR, corporate advertising. We'll explain a little bit more about the managerial process on all this, and is it something that we want to do as a company, and tie it all up with kind of this greater understanding of integrated marketing communications and how measurements of effectiveness kind of impact our campaign studies. All right, so first off, you got to understand that the data we put in needs to be good data. We talk about reliable, valid, trustworthy, and meaningful data. That you're only going to get good information out if I put good information in. So that's kind of the baseline. So when you're designing tools to help you measure what you're doing, you need to make sure that you're building this in, that reliable, that I can always make sure what I'm doing. It's not okay to have data sometimes, but not others, because then you're going to get skewed data. So that I can always have a process, and I have trustworthy, that that data is always going to be there, and it's going to be representative of what people actually think or buy or do. So once again, have to have that data and have to have good data to make the decisions that we need to make. And once we understand that data, we can start using it for a lot of different purposes. We can start using it for helping to design messaging, which we'll talk about here in a minute. We can use it to design things like budgets, which we talked about in the last chapters, right? How are we going to spend the money, and what do we believe is going to be the best bang for our buck? So how are we actually going to evaluate messaging? So there's a couple different components of this. Is that the first off, that effectiveness is kind of a loaded statement. Sometimes we measure effectiveness things like that people like it or don't like it, and you get into this idea of is that good data or not good data. But really what we're trying to get to is some sort of knowledge, some sort of information that we can base decisions on. So when we talk about that what we're doing, we're trying to get some research back and parts knowledge, tells us something that we didn't know before. It can shape attitudes, to put emotion, or build some sort of branding aspect around this. That we're doing this exercise to help understand these attitudes and how people interact with our company or our brand. So we'll kind of break into this idea of understanding the effectiveness of advertising by saying that sometimes we do research and we do studies before things even go out the door. Pre-testing, pilot testing, whatever you want to call it. We've all seen this, like things like sitcoms on TV. You see a pilot episode. I don't know if anyone's ever been to a fast food place where they have a new limited edition menu item that might be just in that region, where they're trying to test it out and see what customers' thoughts are on it. There's all sorts of like little things like A and B testing for designs as well, that you don't really see much of in the public, but they're there. It happens in social media a lot, that two similar ads are sent out, and you trying to track how people interact with one over the other, and it kind of ties into the psychological aspect. I mean, maybe one ad is red and one ad is blue, and for whatever meaning you're trying to get across, the red ad has some sort of psychological, physiological response more than another one. Leads into eye tracking too, which is a really interesting subject of the whole advertising world, like what people look at on a page and how long they look at it. So you're literally hooking people up to cameras, showing them ads, and seeing what they look at, what draws their attention. Gets into this whole design aspect of how you create things to try and get them out there. So that pre-side of it, making sure that we're creating good things, so we understand what research we want to get. Now we're going to create good advertisements, and now we're going to start kind of throwing it out into the world a little bit to see what we can get. Speaking of that, anyone's ever heard of Nielsen? Nielsen's very much tied to TV. They do a lot of data management for TV. So you'll hear things like, oh, the Super Bowl had a 26% share. So we're basically saying 26% of households in the nation were tuned into the Super Bowl during that day for the live performance. So you can get wide ranges of these. Sometimes primetime shows, football games are always very, very high. Sometimes they don't need to be. You get other off-network things. You might have a 1% share or less. But Nielsen does a lot of that data, primarily for TV, but they do a lot of other cross media research as well. All right, so we send out those test pilots. There's different ways we can split it up. I talked about kind of split list experiments, where we talk about A/B testing, right? So we're trying to figure out what one is better than another. And when we're talking about split run and split cable transmission as well, so that's what we're really talking about. Like what is going to give us of A, B kind of choices, choice A, choice B, what's going to give us the most return for what we're doing. We can also do kind of post testing, asking things like recall, what do you remember, what are you aware of, brand identity questions that happen after. That it's nice because if we do this, it means we sent something out into the world, and that the information we're going to get back is very valid, right? So people had some sort of interaction with it. Now the problem is post-testing over pre-testing is we've already sent that out into the world. So might be able to do additions to that or changes to that, but it's already been out there. So we want to try and limit our post-testing as much as possible, try and keep it pre-testing, but that's not always the case either. And if you're in the world of marketing and advertising, you understand that things evolve. Campaigns evolve over time based off of the feedback that we can get from this post-testing part of the work. So when we're doing this, there's also this idea of internet as well. And there's lots of things we look at when it comes to internet, things like clicks and clicks-throughs and unique visitors to a page. So in the world of online advertising, I really like internet because we do get very, very solid data. It's much more quantitative in that it's number based instead of qualitative, which we start talking about like post evaluation things where it's more like, oh, I didn't like this aspect of it. It's kind of fluffy. Where internet clicks, sometimes it's boom, we had 100 people today and this is why. So there's lots of different measurement tools based off of where we are. I will take a little bit of issue with, they talk about sponsorships and they talk about PR. They say probably shouldn't be measured. Well, that's just not true. Everything needs to be measured because how else do you know what you're doing? So, is it hard to measure? Yes, it is very, very hard to measure, but there are ways to do it. It might be some of it that, qualitative kind of measurements, like, do you remember that we were a sponsor kind of aspect of it? But there are quantitative ways to do it as well. Sometimes you get, a sponsor of an event will give you a promo code that you can go, and because they were the sponsor, you can get 20% off of their product because they were a sponsor. Well, they're trying to get some qualitative data that kind of proves what they're doing. So, as far as, other data, contests and sweepstakes, when we're doing that, it's kind of the change for all these coupons, rebates, trade promotions, all of it. We're doing it because we want a change in promotion, and not just a change in promotion. We want an upward tick of sales. If we spend money to run a contest or a coupon and we actually lose money, then that's a double whammy. We spent extra money on marketing and now we're doing even less sales. So that's something you really don't want to do. And hopefully you've gone through enough, research and pre-testing and post-testing that you're not getting into this. But, there's also just kind of interactions as well. So kind of built into a lot of these too, maybe things like, the internet part of it, like page views. Okay, we had X number of people actually submit a coupon. We saw X number of sales, but maybe we had, X number of people also interact with that. We can measure that through online content as well. Personal selling. So personal selling really does come back to, just like everything else we've talked about, sales. But it's sometimes hard to measure that. So, it's personal selling can sometimes be, especially for very high items, can be, have very long times between sales. That it's part of that relationship building with hopes that when the next big purchase comes along, that you're able to, have a relationship with someone that it leads to a second sale or a third sale or a fourth sale or an upgrade in sales. So, that's a big part of personal selling as well. So sometimes it's not the big items, it's the support items that may go along with it. So personal selling, usually you're having a salesperson who has very defined goals. So effectiveness is measured off the ability to achieve those goals. But whoever you are as a personal salesman, they kind of have it here as like a car dash, and it's pretty true, because every company I've ever been with that has personal sales has literally your sales dashboard, where you have the metrics. We see metrics here on customer relation or product knowledge or attitude and appearance, relationships. That these are metrics, and that we want to come up with some sort of score. And so salespeople usually aren't defined on just one score. And if it was, it would be sales. But sometimes there's other things that go along with it. So this dashboard tells us more. Instead of just one number, sales at the end, it says, okay, here's maybe how we're trending. Here's how we're being effective to overall reach our goals. Leads us to kind of final slide in all of our presentation here too. It's like effectiveness of the integrated marketing communication. So this big approach of what we were doing, this overall idea that we have lots of different ways of measuring effectiveness, and we can't take any one over like one's not more important than the overall goals. So just like in the slide before, we had this dashboard where we're talking about understanding that there are several different things. For a good company, there might be things like production metrics that go into this. There might be things like a number of calls in a day, a number of orders, a number of sales in a day, emails answered. There might be things like customers or events attended, and customers or potential customers at those events talked to. So trying to put all together and trying to come up with a dashboard of your own that really gives you good information is like it's a big part of any marketing advertising campaign. So wrap this up with what I started at the beginning of this, like you get out what you put in. So if I spend time trying to build a integrated marketing communication plan that tries to understand as many metrics as possible, that's going to help me make decisions and to understand, is the money I'm spending on marketing a good use of money or not good use of money.